On this episode, I talk with Max Wave and Desolute from Realm. And man, oh man, did we cover some ground. There's so much goodness in here for you. If you're a builder, you're going to learn about building a community, building trust, generating excitement, engagement through rapid delivery, engaging your community and giving them a real sense of ownership and building a game, launching tokens, building the economy, interop, both planned and unplanned, and listen in to see what that means. It's pretty interesting. And team size and on and on. If you're interested in becoming a mod or joining an existing team, then you can learn from Max Wave and Desolute's experience. That's exactly what they've done. And if you're a fan of Realm like I am, then you're going to hear about the history and the evolution of the game and a bit about what's coming next. In terms of disclosures, I do own Realms and AOVs, and I play daily, and I'm pretty damn hooked on this game. With that in mind, here we go. Welcome to Ready Layer 2 with me, Get.Small. This is a podcast for the founders, innovators, and experimenters building the future of Web3 on Arbitrum. Hey everyone, Get.Small here, and I'm really excited to chat with one of my favorite games on Arbitrum. The team from Realm is here. I'm sitting with Max Wave and Desolute. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
Happy to be here.
So I want to start off with just some basic intros. I'll kick to you first, Max Wave, if you want to just say hello. What is your role with Realm and how'd you get involved?
Yes, I'm Max, and I'm a product design lead and also a composer at Realm, but also I am a longtime community member. I started as a player. I joined just a few weeks after the project launch, so I've been around a long time and just through the course of things ended up on the team where I'm very excited to be able to help design products with like a user-based perspective, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. And I love, there's so many people that have gotten involved in their projects that way by being a player first and then absorbing into the teams. I think that's a really cool and unique thing about this space. So thanks for that. Good to have you on. And Desolute, how about you?
Yeah, similar story to Max, but I am in charge of game theory and some of the lore stuff that we have coming in the pipeline. And I joined Realm pretty much when it launched. I want to say the same week it did, so very similar to Max, and just being in the community, communicating with Jonah. Way early on, there was a lot of voice chats, and he would just openly ask for the community's opinion because it was small and it was really easy to get involved. And over time, became a part of the team back in, I want to say, July or August.
Now, Jonah is the founder, and was he kind of a one-man team when this thing launched, or what did that look like?
He was a one-man machine.
One-man machine,
launched.
Nice.
And he has just kind of delivered and had so much to come through. I think it all started really early on with a Medium article. So we have the Realmverse Medium articles that Jonah posts, and there's a lot of like alpha in there and what's coming and the theory behind a lot of things. But there's one article in particular that's from, I think, September 20th, 2021. And I don't even think it's in the Realmverse one. Somebody could probably dig through Medium and find Jonah's original account. But it's him posting about building a turn-based game in a smart contract world. And it was the origin of Realm.
Nice.
And that is honestly what hooked me, and I think it's what hooked a lot of people, because it was right during the loot craze, right? Like, loot was huge in 2021. Like, that September, October, November, everybody was joining layer 3s, and Jonah just kind of had something that was different than what I had seen before. Like, obviously, there's a lot of loot derivatives, but the idea of a turn-based strategy, he took a lot of inspiration from the Civilization games at the time. I was hooked, and I was very interested, and he just continued to deliver even with just text-based contracts early on.
Got it. Yeah. So tell me about that, because I was not around for the beginning of this. What did the text-based game look like?
I don't know if you interacted with any of it, Max. There was no UI. If you wanted to mint a realm, you did it through the contract. You could do it through RBScan, and you could go through there, mint, and then you would do things to your realm. There was a lot of different contracts back then, things that aren't even in the game anymore. But you would interact through your realm just by editing the contract and doing things right through RBScan. And then that's where we actually got a lot of community members who are doing huge things in Treasure now. Wise, I think he's on the Treasure team now. But early on, he developed like a UI for us to kind of interact with the contract, so we didn't have to use text anymore. Mist was really big, and I think the mint launched today for his Arcane with Life DAO
Oh
project.
yeah.
So a lot of these people got their starts early on in the Realm community, which is wild.
Very nice. Yeah, I just minted my wizard like an hour or two ago, so I'm jumping on that one too. But that's cool. Talk about an MVP, right? You write a Medium article, and then you got contracts out there and people interacting directly with the contracts. That's a really cool grassroots type way to start anything, like to put that out there and get people engaged. So was it just like people were like, you read the Medium article and was like, this sounds interesting, so I'm willing to go and poke at this contract? Or did Jonah do anything else to start to drum up that early interest?
He actually did some really early partnerships that scored him myself, Topper, who's on the team, and then Soma, who's probably one of the most prevalent users in Realm right now. I think we all joined through Castle DAO,
Okay.
which was a game early on, and Jonah did a partnership where you could mint at like half price if you wanted to, and that was like the first like 15 to 20 realms that were minted were the group of us, and we were all just kind of hooked through that partnership.
This is one of the first problems that I think founders got to get over is if you're new and people haven't heard of you and you're trying to launch something new, is like having enough trust for them even to come and check it out in the first place and mint something and get over that. Is this thing a scam or does it have any legs at all? So with that partnership, was it just that, oh, here's the thing that I'm getting introduced to? Or did it give you some level of trust that the Castle DAO team was willing to do a partnership with them? Just tell me a little bit more about how you perceive that.
Yeah, so just to give you an idea of the times, it was kind of the Wild West back then. Like Arbitrum had just kind of exploded. I don't know if you were around for when everybody joined Arbitrum for the Nyan tokens. Like everybody
Nope,
was
I'm a
coming
little
over
later.
for that.
Yeah, I was a little. I'm in about a year right now.
Arbitrum launched this thing. A whole bunch of people came over for tokens, and Nyan Token did a whole bunch of giveaways with Castle DAO and some other really early NFT projects. So I got in through that, and then Castle DAO did the partnership with Realm. And it was interesting, like I'd said earlier, because the Realm Medium article was very different than I had seen in the past. But even then, it was very small. Like when I say Topper, myself, and Soma all joined early, there was very few people in here. And I think Max can speak to it a little bit more. But there was a point in time where it was just a group of people who were passionate about world building and this idea of owning a realm that could be something more in the future. But I would say it was maybe like 50, 60 people max.
Yeah.
And then I personally had some life events and I stepped away from Realm and came back 2 months later and the whole thing had minted out. It went crazy on Tofu. They were selling for ridiculous amounts and I actually missed that
Oh,
part. So
man.
I don't know if you want to speak to that explosion, Max, but I know you were there.
I was there. I was the same thing where I just minted my early ID realms and it was really quiet in the Discord and I kind of like what they were saying, but I had come over initially just because ARB was starting to pop off and everyone was talking about L2s. I was making sure I minted this land because who knows, it could be valuable land if L2s blow up. And similar to you, I stepped away for a bit and I came back. I did come back before it minted out, but then, like you said, it was just I was casually hanging out and there wasn't a whole lot going on. I was just interested in the concept of world building. I like economic decisions. I like thinking about stuff like that. So I was just keeping an eye on it and then all of a sudden it minted out and things started to get crazy. And I think the profile that it gained, I guess, with the Moon Boys in the Treasure Discord, that put a lot of fuel on the fire and jump-started the community on a larger scale. And from that point on, I've been realming every day and super engaged. And I think that was the real turning point.
Got it. Very nice. So basically, like this one started up, and as you said, like in the Wild West, and the people that were in there were just willing to experiment with stuff. So probably a slightly different time, and that particular lesson might not be super useful to somebody trying to start off a project, but certainly interesting from setting context. So take it from there a little bit then. A minute out, now there's a lot of attention. Is there a Discord at this time? Like, how is the community interacting?
Yeah, it's all Discord based. And Des said, I think one of the strengths of the community at that point, and this is a lesson that, builders and founders can take, is that Jonah was there. And one of the things that excited me about that project as a community member with some hindsight is that we felt that as a community, we had some say in the direction the game headed.
Right.
Jonah was the developer, and because he was just one guy, he was very agile. So based on a discussion that would happen in the Discord, you might see changes implemented and pushed an hour later. And I have to emphasize that as a community member at that time, I felt that I was connected to the project and I had some stake in it and
Mm.
some equity in a larger sense of just the assets that I owned because I felt invested in the sense that I could affect the outcome of this game. And based on my feedback and my experiences and the experiences of my fellow players, that we were building this game together. And Jonah did a good job of emphasizing that we are watching this game get built in real time and that your feedback matters. If I would be framing it in the sense of what could you take from that as a builder, there's a lot to be said about getting your community invested in the project beyond just the assets they hold by giving them a sense of ownership in terms of the ideas and the feedback they can provide. And I think that's probably one of the greatest forces that kept me around in the early days of Realm, feeling like I was a part of building something great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And how did it evolve from there for you? So you guys are players, you're connected to the game, you're in the Discord, giving feedback, seeing changes. How did that turn into you becoming part of the team?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories involved with that and a lot of community exposure and just having a fun time. But real quick on the building part, I'll answer your question, Git. But I wanted to emphasize too that everything Max just said, what Jonah did without realizing it was conditioning the community to understand that when there is an announcement, when there's something that's happening for Realm, like it's tangible. And what I mean by
Mm,
that is we all are probably in a million Discords. I have so many different crypto projects and Discords, and I have so many little red bubbles in all of them.
yep.
And 9 times out of 10, I go look at the 10 announcements, and I won't name names in some of these Discords. It's like, hey, look at our tweet about something that's coming. We just did an AMA about something that's coming.
Right.
We just did this other thing. It'll happen soon, but it's cool. We got stuff in the pipeline. Every single time there is an announcement or a red bubble from Realm, it's because something tangible has been released. There's been an update to the UI.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a new release for these. There's new variants out. Oh, hey, this new contract just released, so it should make things easier. And that is so valuable in this space when people are just like, I'm going to check in our project 6 months from now because they said
Right.
the stuff is coming, but I don't know when I'm going to get to it. But every time you see that bubble pop in Realm, it is exciting. And I don't have that with really any other Discord. So tying it back to your question, like that got me engaged and involved with the community. And I joined in, I want to say right after the season, was it season 1 or season 2 contract? So we minted out and then we did this season 1 push where you would collect on your realms and you built up these resource scores for all of your realms. And during all of that, there was a big boom in the community. They needed some help. And I actually joined as a mod and was a mod for probably 6 to 8 months, just involved with helping the community, organizing some of the stuff that we're doing, making sure people knew what was going on in chat. I think it's in a much better place now, but because Jonah was a one-man team, Realm was a little bit complicated to get into if you were new. You're like, wait, what's this? What do I have to do?
Oh,
What
right.
is
Yeah.
this game loop?
Mm-hmm.
How do I get involved and interact with this? Is this a good idea? So moderation, it's still great and I love our mods, but it was tough back then. It was like, all right, I'm going to answer the same question 14 times
Yeah.
till we can get something that people can look at.
Yeah.
But so through modding, I joined and then became a part of the team after a mod as like 6 to 8 months, I think.
Okay. And how did that transition happen? Was there just what was going on within Realm that made it so that Jonah was ready to bring somebody actually onto the team as opposed to just interacting with you as a active community member?
Great question. We had launched AOVs, and that was about when I joined the
Oh,
team.
okay.
So AOVs launched. It was pretty big. We had a lot more people coming in. I had provided very much so like Max has done and still does regularly in these conversations in general. People are like, well, what do you guys think about this idea? Well, I think it would work great. I don't think it would. Here's why. And people go back and forth on why they think something will and won't work in Realm. And Jonah himself had reached out to me, and I'm sure it's a very similar story with Max. And it was just like, hey, I really appreciate what you've been doing in chat. I appreciate your ideas. Would you like to help out more and become a part of the team?
Nice. Got it. Very cool. And how about you, Max? What was your pathway there?
I've been very active and very vocal in the Discord from the start. So like I said, I was a power user of Realm, I would say. I was one of the bigger players in the game in terms of assets, and I partook a lot in the economic loops of the game. I also founded the first guild, which had some of the some of the biggest whales in the game and a lot of clever players. So I really had my finger on the pulse of the game theory, particularly from a user perspective. I was also in the Discord daily helping new users because, like Des said, Realm historically was not an easy game to get into because you had to do a lot of reading just to understand what all the things were. So I was very active as a community member helping onboard new players and stuff. And so from that point, there was just a certain stage, I think, where Jonah was looking to expand. And just given my history of always giving UX feedback and design feedback, and I had some suggestions specifically about how we could unify some of the different loops within the UI. At that point, he asked me if I would be interested in coming on and helping with products. So I jumped on that opportunity. I also did some composing for them. If you listen to the music on the Realm site, I did that.
Yep.
And I've been doing some sound design for the app because that's my background in real life, is I'm a composer and sound designer and mixer. So it was just a really natural fit. And it all coincided with just Jonah scaling up and realizing that as our community grew, that he was going to need the support to help build his increasingly ambitious goals as the game loops on the two sides of the game that we had now, realming and adventuring. Everything branches out, and then all of a sudden you realize that you have an awful lot to build.
Yeah, right on. And a couple takeaways there, certainly from a founder side, as you guys laid out there, is that be engaged with the community and take their feedback and let them feel involved. But equally, or maybe even more importantly, is then deliver, right? Like he was giving you stuff to keep you excited, giving you a reason to, like you said, see the red bubble and actually engage rather than pass it by. So I think that's an important takeaway. But also what's happening here then is now you got really engaged people who are becoming part of the team, right? So just as a founder, thinking through that whole story, I think is a great way to think about how to start something yourself. But also some of you listeners might be thinking you want to join an existing team, and the pathway there is pretty clear too. Get involved in the Discord, be helpful, add value. That's always the case, right? If you're adding value to any situation or any relationship, things tend to happen from that. You can see a kind of clear pathway here. Real quick before we transition, because I want to talk about some of these game loops and the ambitious game loops as you laid out. But real quick before I jump, I'll point this to you, Des, because you actually became a mod first. If there's a listener out there who's interested in becoming a mod in a project, not necessarily Realm, but just in a project, is there any kind of direct advice you'd give to them, like about how to make that happen?
Absolutely. And I think the biggest piece of advice is engage with the community and show that you were involved and care about the project. In this space, I feel like you'll get pings from random people being like, hey, I've moderated 7 Discords and been doing this for years. I'd like to mod your project. And it's like, that's great, but why do you care about Realm?
Right.
Are you passionate about it? Do you understand? Like, I'm not saying we don't want a moderator who isn't involved with the game, but it's much easier to see and interact with somebody that everybody in the community knows. Our mods are amazing right now. Bearded, Moon, all of them, they interact with the community on a regular basis, but they're also there to answer and support. And I would say the biggest piece of advice is get involved.
Yep. Yeah.
Show up every day, say hello, answer questions that people have in chat, and just make yourself known.
If I might add as well, that was a very politically correct answer for Des, but I would go as far to say that I wouldn't want a mod that isn't involved in the game, because back to what we were just talking about, hiring within, I think, is crucial. It depends on larger scale stuff. If you're bringing in an art director or something, they might not necessarily be a player, but on a community level, I think what a lot of people underestimate is the cultural context of all this stuff. So the Discord is a culture, the game is a culture, the lore is a culture. And I think the people involved have to understand that. And I think that's why me and Des were good fits to join the team, because we had already spent the past year thinking every single day about the game theory of this game and interacting with it and living that, which it is a cultural thing. So I would say that bringing people on from within your community is the absolute best move that you could do. And I personally wouldn't want a mod that wasn't a player.
Yeah.
But that's just my take.
No, that it resonates because basically you guys proved that you cared. And the people who are going to best serve the community are going to be people who care. So no better way to do it.
I got one more piece for people
Yeah,
who
man.
want to be mods. And this is personal experience for both me and Max. Voice your opinion and it's okay to be wrong in your opinion, right? Don't be mean in chat, but if you don't think something's working for the game or the community, or you don't like the way it feels for you in the project, it's okay to voice that. There have both been things that Max and I have voiced our distaste for a direction or a change, or maybe we should try it this way, and we have both been on both sides of the arguments many times in some of the heated arguments in the Discord before we were team members. And it's okay to have passion about the game. I think too many people get involved in projects and don't want to voice their opinion because they don't want to be wrong. So they just
I
with the
love that.
flow. But it's that counter argument that adds perspective. And whether or not the dev decides to go with your argument or your direction, you providing that perspective may have given them something they didn't know even existed. Oh, hey,
Absolutely.
I forgot about that small community of people. I didn't even realize that. And that's something Max and I have both been passionate about. And we've definitely had things that we've pitched that have been shot down before we were even team members. But I just want people to know that it's okay to speak up in chat. You're not going to get grilled. People might have differing opinions. Keep it civil. But it's okay to have an idea and feel like, oh, I don't know if I want this to happen that way because these are my assets and they mean this to me.
Yeah, I love that. That's good life advice, period. But certainly that applies here. And very rarely will you speak up if you're doing so, like you said, respectfully, right? Like you don't want to be a jerk, but if you speak up and you're being respectful and you're coming from a place like you actually care about a thing and you're trying to help make it better, very rarely will that go wrong. And frankly, if it did, you might want to find yourself a different community anyway. So there's almost no risk in throwing that out there. So I love that advice. And I will say, as a relatively new player in Realm, I've been doing AOV for a while, but I wasn't super active, and I have now been in the Discord over the last couple of weeks. I'll agree with you guys. The mods are awesome. And generally speaking, the community is just awesome. Every time I've gone in there with a question, I have an answer like in seconds, it seems. You guys do a great job of that. I just want to compliment you. And so stepping a little bit forward in the journey here, I want to have one of you guys, and you can, whoever wants to take it first, lay out like the basis of the game here, right? Because we haven't really introduced the concept of Realm, so anybody who isn't familiar with the game still doesn't have that base understanding to work from here. So tell us, what's the basis of Realm?
I'll start, but Des is he's the great public speaker here. But I can start by saying that we have two separate sides of the game. We have got the Realm side, which is basically an economic world building game where you manage lands, so to speak, and you make economic decisions on what you want to do with your resources. All realms can produce different collectibles, which are used to build different structures, which have different utility within the game. And it's very interesting because it creates a lot of decision points where you have to decide what makes the most sense to build, what makes the most sense to produce based on the current economic state of the game. And then on the other side, you have the adventurer side, which features beautiful hand-drawn art. And these are NFT hero type characters with different traits that you can battle, train, go on missions, and collect tokens. Our native token, one of our two native tokens called Anima, which just went live for trading the other week. So they're two very different sides of the game, but they are completely interwoven economically. The AOV side interacts with the Realm side, and the Realm side interacts with the AOV side, and they provide things for each other. And there's just some beautifully crafted game loops that connect those two sides of the game.
Yeah, I think you spoke very eloquently. The original pitch for Realm is a world building and exploration game rooted in GameFi. And it, like Max said, it's split into two. You have this Realmer, which he described, and you have the Adventurer. They're not mutually exclusive, but you can be just an Adventurer or just a Realmer or do a mix of both. But I think the key loop here that kind of ties everything together that is a little bit different for Realm is the social coordination aspect. You have this interaction between adventurers and realmers, and they all impact and affect each other. Things like the prime convergence, where everybody in the community, whether you're an adventurer, a realmer, or somebody who just happened to win some collectibles through a Twitter contest, can influence the prime convergence, which is our big vote that happens every 3 months that changes what collectible you're allowed to build structures with. And that's a whole game loop in and of itself. But also within that social coordination, you have things like Realmers. They want to be able to stake Anima eventually, but they can't do it unless adventurers are interacting with your realm. And you can absolutely just use your own adventurers on your own realm, but you're not going to get ahead of the pack unless you have some social coordination. And in fact, we have a whole section of our Discord devoted to people pitching like, hey, come visit my realm. Come do this with my AOVs. Come do this with my realmers, and we'll, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And that social coordination loop is really what binds everything together outside of the actual game, which is the economy that Max had brought up. And one of the first things we established was the economy. Jonah had talked forever about how having a strong economy is what's going to lead to strong game loops, strong communities, and people interacting. So we had the economy of collectibles go up first, and those are kind of tied to everything now on top of this massive loot box loop that we just dropped. So it was a lot to take in. If you want to ask specific questions, I'm happy to go into more details.
There is a lot going on here. And like I said, as a player, I've spent the last couple of weeks tearing through documents and Discord chats and everything else, figuring it all out. So I have to remember what it was like to not know these things, to ask the right questions for the listener here. But I guess I'm not trying to help people to learn to play realms as part of this conversation, but rather to think about, as designers, how did you come up with these pieces? What was the process of building an economy from scratch? You said you started with the realms and the collectibles creation. So let's start there. If I have a realm and you rolled out a loop that said I can create collectibles, what was it that made me want to? How did you incentivize the users to take that action and keep doing it?
Great question. This kind of organizes our trajectory here. So we started with realms. That was the first asset. There's a little over 5,000 completely minted out. There will only ever be that many realms. And then our first game loop was these collectibles. So each realm, when you minted them, had geo features. So it could be a volcano, an ocean, a glacier. And each of those ties to a specific type of collectible, whether it be aquatic themed animals, technology pieces like artificial intelligence or Bitcoin, earth-related ores and minerals, or food. There's 4 types of collectibles. So why do I need those collectibles? Because I can use them to build cities. Why do I want those cities? Because it adds a production score to my realm. And this was our first loop. You would create collectibles with your realm. So you'd interact with them, and every 6 days you would create a certain amount of collectibles based off of the features that were on your realm. And then you would use those collectibles to create cities. And you would stake those cities to your realm. And it was a competition that happened monthly. And there was really substantial magic rewards really early on. Jonah was upfront that this wasn't going to be a permanent game loop. Hey, we're just incentivizing this as a game loop right now till we roll everything out. Okay. But it was very competitive. We had leaderboards on the website. Every month it would reset. People are trying to farm as many collectibles as they can to build these cities to up their production score on their realm. And that would reset monthly. And so that was our first loop for the competition. So people would create these collectibles, and then you would craft them with your realm. But there was also people just creating collectibles and just selling them on Trove because people were buying them up to try and get this magic reward at the end of the month. Right. So that was our first initial gameplay loop, and that had us building collectibles and essentially burning the collectibles to create these city structures.
Got it. And as players, then you have basically you had a choice when you came in there is, maybe I have one realm and I don't think I can compete for the magic, so I'm just going to churn these collectibles as quickly as I can and sell them on Trove and generate a little bit of magic myself that way. And then the others are competing, both for bragging rights in the Discord, I'm sure, but for some magic rewards and getting that going. So it was like, I assume, was the magic just coming from Treasury, from the mints, or where was the magic rewards coming from?
Yeah, so we had magic rewards from the magic that we had staked within a harvester time.
Atlas Mine.
Atlas Mine.
It
was pre-harvester. So yeah, this is before the Atlas Mine was shut down, and that's where pretty much all of the emissions from the treasure space were coming from. Okay. So we had a lot of magic staked there, and we were giving the emissions back to the community via this loop. Okay. The other piece that I wanted to state about this loop is this was, I want to say February of last year is when this all started. Okay. And this loop that we're talking about was the kickoff of social coordination. You really early on had people realize, I don't have enough realms by myself to compete and get this top spot. But if me and Max team up and we pool our resources, we'll split the rewards at the end of the month 50-50 or something like that.
Okay.
So you had people really early on pooling their resources to try and claim top spot, and that's a little bit how those guilds formed early on. It was right around then. And then the other piece of this is when we were building cities, there was only one type of collectible that could build cities, and then it changed every 3 months. So you had these guilds that stockpiled all of these realms that might be one type of collectible, and then you had other people trying to make it so you could build the cities with a different collectible. So it's this big like tug of war almost that happens within the community on what realms are valuable and what aren't, and it's constantly changing from the community perspective, which was really cool too. So that was like a second loop that was layered on top of this first one.
Yeah, that one is really interesting. So then that is the prime convergence that you mentioned. That happens every 3 months, did you say? Or every 1 month?
Actually,
Okay.
we actually just had it, and it's funny because we have people who come into chat that are like, wow, why would I buy an aquatic realm? I cannot do anything with my aquatic collectible.
I just saw someone today say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, buddy, if you were here a month ago, aquatic collectibles were through the roof on Trove because that was the only thing you could use to build cities.
Okay.
However, we just had the prime convergence, and now tech collectibles are the big star right now on top of Earthen because we have the monuments. And there's more game loops in the pipeline, and that's all I'll say there. But as of right now, the prime convergence, it is a big deal and it changes. So your realm that may be, let's say ocean, because that's the big one for aquatic collectibles, you may think it's not worth anything now. But in 3 months, if ocean or if aquatic becomes the prime convergence again, that's going to be a much more valuable realm to people.
Right.
And if I might add, that's an interesting enough concept, and that's fine. But even if you don't play Realm and you don't care about the details, what is interesting about that is that person who might have that question isn't just a passenger in that experience. If they want to help dictate the outcome of the utility of that realm, they can have a say in that, and they can vote in the prime convergence. So this kind of goes back to the very first stuff we talked about, where community members feeling like they have a say in the game and they can impact the game and the gameplay. This is a different iteration of that, but another thing that appeals to a lot of players and something that encourages social coordination. Hey, let's get together. All these aquatic realms are cheap right now on secondary because no one can use them. We can buy all these up right now for floor and then stockpile enough collectibles to vote with, and we can push it through on the next prime convergence. So it's just the general psychology of that is very interesting because, again, it's connecting your community to the outcome of the game. And I think that's very bullish. It gives people a tremendous connection to the game rather than just waiting to see what happens next.
That's like real life economic gameplay right there. And that's super fascinating. So I'm going to kind of keep progressing through here on the timeline and the evolution of the economy. Once you had this and people are building cities and they're competing for magic and everything else, what's next in this timeline?
It's the AOV. So we had, Jonah always calls these times between like big releases like a time of prosperity. Enjoy your collectibles, enjoy this loop, get to know it.
Yeah.
It will change dramatically and quickly. And so we had, I want to say probably like 5 to 6 months of this gameplay loop, monthly leaderboards, and technically the monthly leaderboards are still there. So we ran through that for 6 months, and then AOVs hit, and all hell broke loose in a great way. It was completely different. It was definitely an appeal to a lot of people, and it spiced up the game quite a bit. But basically how AOVs initially launched is, actually, Max, I don't even think we launched with battles right off the bat, but I think so. AOVs, they look very similar to what people think are these like computer generated PFPs, but it's all hand-drawn artwork.
The art is,
I don't think.
artists.
Hold
art
on.
is so good.
I don't think it looks like computer generated. It looks way better.
It looks
CBS
hand-drawn
would
to
kill.
me.
So
Yeah,
it looks
chill.
hand-drawn. I
It
think
does
what I
look
meant to say
hand-drawn. We'll edit
that,
out.
no, the iterative art. So a lot of people come here and they're like, oh, look at like this thing that I minted. Is yours different than mine? And that is not the case in Realm. Everybody gets it when you mint it. Everybody got one of the original 6 variants, and then you choose where you want to go.
Yeah,
versus minting something like, I don't know, Bored Ape, right? You're gonna get it, and that's yours, and it's unique and different. But the way your AOV or PFP, whatever you want to call it, in this crypto space for Realm is different. It's because it's what you make it. At the time, we were doing missions to gain trait points. We were transcending and leveling up our AOVs. And then very shortly after we launched AOVs, we introduced battles and exploration. And that kind of unified the game loop of connecting the two. So we launched AOVs, and AOVs have the ability to explore realms. And when you explore a realm, you get one of our tokens called Particle. And I guess that's another big piece. So when I say all hell broke loose with AOVs, is we launched Adventures of the Void, and then we had Particle and Anima, which were our two tokens, all launched at the same time. And when I say launched, they were soulbound tokens. So it wasn't something you could trade. It didn't have value versus Anima right now, which has been unlocked, and it is a tradable token. But at the time, it was just tied to your wallet, soulbound. You would get Anima through doing things with your AOV, and you would get Particle by exploring a realm. And the amount of Particle you got was based off of the amount of work people had put into their realms early on and the resource score that people had built in their realms. So that immediately made the realm market just fly off the shelves with some of these high resource score realms. Because when somebody visits or explores a realm, and this was that loop at the time, the person who's visiting the realm gets a small percentage of Particle based off of their AOV's level, and the person who owns the realm gets a very large amount of Particle based off of the resource score of the realm. So it paid for you to have a high resource realm and incentivize a lot of people to come visit your realm. So we had people posting in chat, I will give you X, Y, and Z if you come visit my realm. In fact, I think this was around the same time that Beacon launched. And I don't remember who it was, Max, but somebody was giving away almost all of their Beacon loot to people who visited their realm with their AOVs.
Self-service interoperability. I love it.
They weren't just giving it all away. They were market buying. They were the single biggest buyer of Beacon loot.
Oh,
they were giving out hundreds of items per week, and by doing so, it was very clever because they bought one of the highest resources realm for a tremendous amount of magic. It was like 25,000 magic at the time, and they were spending every week a lot of money on the secondary of Beacon. I'm sure the Beacon players loved him, and he was manually keeping track of this through the blockchain data, and he was sending it out. But it was very enterprising. And if we want to zoom out again and just talk about the big thesis playing out here, it's very interesting that you created a game and a scenario where enterprising people can find novel ways to basically build on top of their asset. They basically created an attraction. They created their own reward system.
Yep.
And it's just very interesting to me. And that's what I love about the realm culture, is that there's just so many different paths you can take. I love that it's a game of decisions. And that example there is a perfect example of what keeps Realm interesting to players, is that you have the opportunity to do stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you're going to attract that type of person to a game like this because of the loops that you're creating. But then that player basically single-handedly expanded your economy beyond the game itself, which is really freaking cool when you think about it.
That takes us right into Interop, right? That's another big part of what Jonah envisions for Realm, is it being a place where different games can work together and can provide syncs for each other's game assets and connect them, give them utility within each other's games. Pretty soon, I don't want to fast forward too much, but we're talking about it, but pretty soon in Realm, we are going to be able to have other NFTs like Smalls and Legions and Tell Heroes. They're going to be able to come and battle and do missions and quests within Realm. So it just opens up an entire world of Interop and so much potential there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And they're going to expand then. Like I said, I'm making an assumption here, but if you expand beyond the Adventures of the Void that already exist, you're going to have a whole bunch more characters coming in that can create Particle, which is then going to change the dynamics there, right? Where people are going to want to start building cities again so that they can make more room for people to come in and generate Particle in their land. It's going to really change the economy when you do that, isn't it?
Before we fast forward too much, we've introduced the two tokens and how they came into the game. But if we're talking to builders here, I think we should mention something which is one of the things that we've had to consider the most at Realm, and one of the biggest pitfalls that we want to avoid, and I think we are doing an absolutely stellar job of, if I may pat ourselves on the back here for a second, which is making sure that your tokens, before you make them tradable, are adequately sunk. So Des mentioned that at launch, both tokens were soulbound, meaning that you could earn them in-game via gameplay, and you could also spend them in-game, which would burn the tokens. Everyone loves deflationary tokenomics. But what's important is that they weren't tradable at that time. So everyone was motivated enough by the game loops to acquire them, but The big thing is before we launch Anim, and I think that all creators should be aware of, is that if you're going to release a token, you want to make sure that there are ample sinks in the game where you can absorb a lot of that supply. And you've got to create compelling enough game loops for your players that they would rather spend it in game than just take it all and dump it on the market. And that's one thing that I'm really proud of over at Realm, is that we're watching our players when they can freely take their anima and sell it, but instead of doing that, they're buying more because they want to level up their heroes. They want to keep up with the training. They want to pull loot boxes. And so there's a huge lesson here that is one of the things for speaking to creators I'd like to emphasize most is focusing on that economy, focusing on your game loops, and focusing on your sinks before you make a token tradable is one of the biggest gems that I could give anyone here. And it's worked so far incredibly well for Realm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're maybe a week or two past launch here, but I can see that playing out. And actually, the perfect example of what you just said was in the Discord in the last day or two. The conversation was, I don't want to use the Rabby wallet because it tells me the USD value of the anima that I'm spending on Transcendence, and it makes me sad. So the decision, the decision is, I don't even want to know what I could be selling it for because it's too important for me to continue in the game loop. And that's what I'm going to focus on, which is, it's fascinating to watch the psychology of it all play out. All right. So in the history then, so you've launched Anima, that comes with it loot boxes, which is the other thing that people are all hyped up for. And as you said, I believe I saw Jonah say this is one of those kind of periods of prosperity where loot boxes are going to be maybe a little bit more stacked than they might be in the future. That's driving some of the excitement too, I imagine, and the reason why people are using these things as well as they are. So break down loot boxes for us here, and then we'll regroup and talk about what's coming next.
Yeah, so loot boxes has been a long time coming. I think Jonah teased loot boxes, I want to say in December, right before Christmas break. He put a little teaser of like, loot boxes coming to Realm, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And here we are 6 months later, we have loot boxes now, and it is absolutely wild. But the basis for loot boxes was for us to introduce an additional mechanism for Interop. We've talked a lot about Interop, and Interop is coming where, like, we've already talked about how you could bring a small, and we'll be able to bring a small into the Realmverse. But there's another piece of Interop, and that is the items that you get in all of these games. So right now, you can get treasure fragments within these loot boxes. You can get Knights of the Ether rings within these loot boxes. And that may be appealing to people who haven't explicitly played Realm before, but now they have this, oh, maybe I can add a couple treasure fragments a day to my pulls by playing Realm and doing these loot boxes.
Right.
So loot boxes, they add that. And then it's also a new looper mechanism that's like a teaser for our crafting system that is also coming because it's giving you all of these materials for that. It's our delivery mechanism for a lot of things.
Right.
There's also going to be some other new stuff that's coming for loot boxes. It's basically going to be our way to give back to the community versus doing giveaways. There's smaller things that it's done a lot for as well. Like DeFi is our community manager and he runs all of these poker tournaments and stuff. And previously the prizes were you get 10 collectibles of whatever the prime convergence is, or you get this thing. Now it's you get loot boxes, and people are far more excited about just getting these loot boxes because you don't know what you're going to get than they were about the collectibles previously.
Des, let's use that to jump right off into the community building aspect of this. You mentioned DeFi and the poker tournaments and everything else. Commonly used mechanism for building community that I've seen across a lot of the treasure games in the Discords. So talk to us about that from the standpoint of using that as a tool to keep the community engaged and I guess build camaraderie amongst them and make them just build that core. Just tell us about what the approach to community building that you all take, and again, advice for somebody who might be trying to do that themselves.
There are a lot of different ways to engage the community. Some of the ways we employ here at Realm is DeFi. We consistently have usually 3 to 4 like community game event nights. Those usually involve like poker, Gartic AI. It's you draw stuff and it's pretty fun. So there's a bunch of these different games that we do that communities can join, and there's always stuff involved with that. The other piece that's layered in there is usually once a month, one of those game nights, like once a week, is tied to another community. We recently did one with Knights of the Ether. We've done one with some stuff outside of Treasureverse too, where it's like, hey, this community is going to join our poker game, and if you guys want, you can join their poker game next week as well. So it gets that camaraderie, and you get these people that haven't been involved or exposed to Realm excited because they potentially just want some asset in Realm and they don't know what it is. So
Yep.
that's part of it too. That's a big connection. And then the other piece is these kind of one-off events that we do pretty regularly, whether it's Jonah deciding that, hey, we want to incentivize the market right now. So anybody who buys this AOV, or buys an AOV or buys a realm within this time frame, you are going to get some reward. The other huge piece for community that has been happening over the last month and a half that Max, I'll let you speak to, is Zealy quests. It has been an amazing way to incentivize people to talk about Realm, promote Realm, get excited about it, and really just talk to their extended communities about it outside of just the small Treasureverse community. Or if you want to chime in there, Max, on Zealy.
Yeah, Zealy has been really great. I think Git can even speak on this because he's mentioned before that's what kind of got him
That's what roped me.
interested in the Realm side. I actually discovered Zealy because I saw some of my friends grinding for some menial role in some random chain starting up some new decks, and people were grinding insanely for a menial role or some whitelist. And I thought it was really clever how these people were just, they liked the daily grind and the activity. And I thought to myself, we have a lot more to offer to our community members than just a Discord role, because we're constantly giving away limited edition variants and AOVs and all that stuff. And I thought to myself, what better way to get these prizes, instead of doing random draws, into the hands of the people that are actually engaged, than to set up some quests. And the whole Realm ecosystem is perfectly ripe for daily questing because we've got a series of our daily and weekly activities. So right away we can create quests for those. It's just another iteration of activity is rewarded. But then there's more specific stuff we can do, like targeting and driving traffic to specific social media posts that we want to hype up. And the community has absolutely loved it. We've seen a tremendous engagement rate. They're still going. And now, so far, I'm looking at it is this is how we can get out a lot of the limited edition variants. Jonah has teased that there's more ways coming, but so far we found Zealy to be a wonderful way to get prizes in the hands of those people who are active, engaged, and deserve it the most.
Yeah. And my perspective on that was I wanted one of those limited edition AOV skins just because I wanted it, right? So I had a couple of AOVs that I was battling and exploring with. And it's been in the back of my mind. I want to check out Realms for a long time. But to your point, there's a lot to it. There's a little bit of a barrier to entry in that you got to sit down and read a bunch of docs and figure a lot out. And that kept being just enough friction to prevent me from doing it. But the Zealy quest got going on those. And then I got talking to people and I just got more interested in the community. And being in the Discord, there's just like stuff going on that looked interesting. And I was like, I want to know more about that. What are they talking about? What does it mean? And that's when I did finally take the time to read docs. And I was like, all right, it's time to buy a realm. And once I actually started touching those game loops, I started getting hooked on them really quickly. So again, like Zealy as a tool for just getting people engaged, like for me, I was basically like that fence sitter who was going to get involved sometime, but you pulled me in with it. So I think a marvelous tool for that demographic of users or potential users. And I'm sure there's others that are getting involved too, different from me, but that's just one example that worked really well. So question for you guys on the Interop in particular, because there's a lot of that going on, and being part of it as a user, and then listening to you guys talk about this, the Interop within the game creates so many interop outside of the game. Basically, like your example there of merging the two communities for a poker game, or the example of the player that decided to trade people beacon stuff, like that creates this whole other level of interaction with communities that never existed before, which is super fascinating to me. So I think we're going to see it. I think it's going to explode once it catches on. And what I'm curious about, and the question is how much interaction or coordination is happening between the teams, between Realm and Knights of the Ether and Smallverse, etc. How much coordination is necessary there versus how much of this is like permissionless, if you will? Can you guys just, can you put a small in the game with, just because you decide to, or do you got to have permissions, or do you got to, like, how does that whole process work?
This is a question that I don't know if we can answer it to the fullest for you.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can say is any project that wants to be involved with Interop if you're interested, should reach out to us. There is absolutely communication happening because we're giving away assets tied to it too, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
have the treasure fragments, which is something that Treasure came to us and we have an allocation monthly for it, which is nice. So there's some limits there. And then I'm sure there's something similar with the Coat partnership, but I'm not involved specifically with that on the Realm side.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that it is careful consideration that goes into this. There's two sides to this, right? I could be a dev and I could come up with some game, and because it's the blockchain and all of these things exist, I could take the PFPs of any project I want, and if it lives in somebody's wallet, I could assign stats to it and make it something that can interact in a game with mine. Like
Right.
that's
That's
the nature
exactly what I
of
was thinking. I was like,
crypto.
that's possible, right? Yeah.
It absolutely is. And I think a lot of questions that people have had that we're not going to answer here, but like people are thinking about is like, all right, so if smalls come into Realmverse and they can battle, like what do their stats look like? Obviously, that's something that we want to approach with care and consideration. So there absolutely is discussions happening with these teams and how they're
Yeah.
going to look. But we also don't want to be in a space where we create friction in the treasureverse as well. Like we don't ever want somebody to be like, I'm just going to bring all of my assets to Realm and not the
Right.
game that they're supposed to be there for. It should be something that boosts both communities.
Yep.
And if that's the case, there has to be conversation and careful consideration there.
Yeah, that's what I figured. But this is new territory, and it's exciting. But we don't necessarily know how it's all going to play out, and that's what made me curious about how much interaction was happening. So thank you for that. The last thing that I want to do here, as we're winding out of time here, is just give you a chance to talk about some upcoming loops, because I know there's a lot. There seems to be a lot coming. You mentioned crafting. There's already some teaser screens of the game for it, but you mentioned the Medium articles, which I'll link up in the show notes here. If you're interested in this game, highly recommend checking out. Those are talking about all kinds of other game loops coming. So if you just take a minute and give the listener a sense for where things are going next, and then the last question I'm going to ask you guys, you think about this as you're going through it: is there any concern as builders for moving too quickly, for adding too much, right? Because it's something that you guys have shown that you can do, is that you can build and produce and roll out really intriguing game loops quickly. Is there any consideration for going too far too quickly?
I can speak on that and give a pretty honest answer. Is that I don't think we're moving too quickly right now. I think we are getting to the point where we wanted to be. We were able to make the right hires, and we've got some extremely talented engineers, developers on the team now. So I think it's the opposite. I think we're starting to finally really hit our stride. A lot of these game loops have been carefully considered and have been in the works for a long time. So we now have the capacity to start rolling those out at the speed that we want to, while still maintaining proper planning. We meet every week, we talk game theory, we talk economics, and I think we have a very well-rounded team in terms of being able to consider everything from the engineering perspectives to the economic considerations to how this is going to feel and be perceived by the community. So if anything, I feel like we're just starting to hit our stride. And of course, like you said, building too fast is not recommended. And I think the slow and steady approach, especially through this bear market, has allowed Realm to survive. When you see, unfortunately, there's a lot of projects that are struggling or closing. So I think slow and steady building has served the project, and I see a long, bright future for Realm. But that being said, now that we have the capacity, it's time to ramp it up. So you need to be able to seize the opportunity and take those steps towards growth when it's time. And I think that's where you're seeing where Realm is at right now. And I don't see us letting up the gas for the rest of the year.
Okay, very cool. And how big is the team right now to support this?
It is 8 people, I believe.
people?
So we have Topper and DeFi who handle a lot of the community, and Topper helps with the docs and a lot of the tutorial videos that are amazing. Then
Mhm.
for devs, we have Gallo, Laser, and Jonah, and then on like a smaller side, Dicey, and then myself and Max, and then GBS is our artist.
Got it. Very cool. Okay, so not a huge team, but not tiny either. But yeah, you guys are definitely churning some stuff out. I've been very impressed with everybody and everything that's come down. And everything's high quality too, which is super important. So kudos for that. And then just last thing on the way out here is, what do you want to just share with the audience about what's coming up next with Realm? And then anywhere you send them to for docs, anything else you want me to link up in the show notes, etc.
I can share what I'm really excited about personally. So when you're looking at Realm, for the longest time, we've had these two gameplay routes. You can be a realmer, or you can be an adventurer, or you can be both, really, but it's kind of like split into between one or two. So you have to have an AOV to interact, or you have to have a realm. With the unlock of Anima and the introduction of Anima staking, which is coming, you now have this third pillar that's coming into the ethos here of like staker or Anima holder, because you can hold Anima and stake it to somebody's realm and not be somebody who owns a realm or an AOV. And so I'm really excited to see the social coordination that comes from Anima staking, with people being like, wow, here's somebody who's generally into DeFi stuff. They have a lot of Anima and they want to stake it. Well, they need to find a realm to stake it to. And there's going to be social coordination there. It's not just you go to a staking contract and hit stake. It's going to be a little bit different. And that social aspect and this new group of people that may be interested for different reasons that's going to come in has me very excited.
Yeah, that's cool. How about you, Max? What excites you most about what's coming?
Okay, we have crafting coming up, and that's one thing that Des is an expert in as a lifelong kind of RPG game player. But I'm very excited about that because it's going to give utility to a lot of the items that everyone's feverishly collecting right now that are in the loot boxes. And that's one thing that I think we can get right. And I'm excited about being able to deliver that excitement and that sense of creation and sustain the demand for the loot boxes. I'm very excited about that. I think there's very exciting crafting items that we can make that are going to provide utility that people really want within the game. So I'm very excited about that. And even on a personal level, as a realmer, one thing I'm very excited about is right now, by partaking in some of the game loops, Des hinted about it with the staking, realmers have an opportunity right now via activity and building to permanently alter the productive potential of their realm assets by permanently boosting the staking capacity. If you're familiar, I've heard this analogy, if you're familiar with Bridge World and Harvesters, basically right now there's a bit of a gold rush going on where all the realmers are basically, they have the opportunity to build their own mini harvesters. So for me as a realm owner, I'm very excited about being able to put in some work right now and make some good economic choices that allow me to permanently alter the productive potential of realm. Because I'll finish off by saying that realm assets, Jonah has always stated this, and I fully agree, that realm assets should be valued by their productive potential. And we're seeing right now with our adventurers, if you level them up, they yield you more tokens, they yield you rarer loot. And on the realm side, we're seeing the same thing. You can put in work and you can build your staking capacity, and that's going to have a yield for you in the future. So I'm excited about building. I'm excited about partaking in the game loops and building the future potential of my assets. And for that reason, as a player, not even as a team member, my realm assets are precious to me because I love building them up. I love optimizing them. And I love the fact that we are all partaking in a game of productivity and economic decisions and choices where sometimes you have to choose between two different things. So that's what I'm excited about right now. And we're only just getting started. As the game loops grow, these decisions on what you spend your resources on are going to get harder and harder because you're going to have more options. But that is really fun and exciting to me.
Yeah, right on. That's where I'm having a lot of fun right now too, is trying to get that Anima staking capacity up on the realm. And I grew up playing SimCity and Age of Empires and Civilization, all those types of games. So all of this building activity really appeals to that. So if you were into those games, those types of games, and you haven't checked out Realm yet, I strongly recommend it. Team keeps delivering. You guys, seriously, very impressed. Appreciate the time coming here today to share. And yeah, I look forward to just seeing where you all take this, because I've learned very quickly to, as Des said earlier, get excited about those updates when they come in, because each thing's been fun. It's added a lot of interesting things to the game. So kudos to you. Kudos to the rest of the team. Keep building in the bear.
Thank you. I'll see you in the battle arena.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for having us.
Right on. All right, to you, the listener, we'll see you next time on Ready Layer 2. Thank you for listening to Ready Layer 2. If you're an Arbitrum builder with a story to share, then hit me up on Twitter at GitSmall, GITSMOL. Learn more at gitsmall.com.